Namaste, book lovers, and good morning. It is truly a pleasure and an honor for me to be giving this keynote address at the Neev Literature Festival. So thank you, Neev, and thank you, Kavita, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. This festival, with the beautiful title Imaginary Lines, is a very important signpost in the journey to ensure that all of India's children get a chance to immerse in good books. As a society, we need to do, I believe, many more things that are focused on the intellectual and cultural development of our 300 million children. It is really no exaggeration to say that it might determine the very future of this country. Reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body, and a reading nation is a thinking nation, which is just so important to lift us out of the multiple predicaments that we face as a society today. Today I'm going to speak to you as my journey as a reader, a writer, a publisher, and then back to being a writer and a reader again. I started my love of books, like I'm sure many of you did, very early, learning to read long before I was formally taught in school. I would peer over my elder sister's shoulder and look at all those fun books that she borrowed from the library nearby. And my entire childhood was spent between the pages of hundreds of books. My mother had to literally wrench me away from the pages of the book I was reading so that I could at least attend to the chores that I had to do, such as laying the table. And I would just say, thank God for all those authors and illustrators who carried me off into a world of make-believe, letting me entwine myself into the lives of strange and wonderful characters to whom I could talk, whose stories I could extend, and who would always be my secret friends. What an innocent time it was. No TV, no computers, no internet, and no mobile phones. It was so much fun to walk down to the library, to choose our books, to pay the few paisa of reading charges from the pocket money that our mother would give us, and come home to read and read. And if we were lucky, we were also allowed to buy a little crunchy snack to go with it to add to the enjoyment, and it was sheer bliss. I started out with the Noddy books of Enid Blyton. Noddy was this strange little creature with whom I could somehow identify, even though he was so different from me, possibly because of the scrapes that he kept getting himself into. Toyland became a magical place for me, and I kept returning and returning to the books again and again. Of course, the illustrations were also so beautiful and kept us hooked. And by the age of 6, I was reading the Mallory Tower series and any other Enid Blyton book I could get my hands on. I also read the William books and, of course, Winnie the Pooh. One of my biggest regrets is that I did not read much in our own languages, not even in my mother tongue Marathi. Not even though my own mother was a Marathi scholar and a Sanskrit scholar as well. She wanted us all, us sisters, to be fluent in English, the then upwardly mobile language. And also, it was not so easy to find books and stories for young children in Marathi or even Hindi. We did get to read comics, Vikram Betal, the Panchatantras, Akbar and Birbal, and a few others. And occasionally, I would get to see these comics at my cousin's home in Marathi. So I would read those in Marathi there. But that was not enough. I did not sustain my reading in Marathi, and I now realize just how important it is to be able to read in many languages, especially in a country like ours, where the dialect and the language can change every 100 kilometers. This ability to read and think in multiple languages may well be the glue that will keep the many threads of our social fabric from unraveling in the future. And luckily for me, however, that did not prevent me from getting stories in Marathi, because thanks to my beloved grandmother, Atya, as we called her, I got thousands of stories, mostly about the Bhakti saints of Maharashtra. She was an amazing storyteller. Till today, my eyes can water remembering her powerful tales of the difficult life of the orphaned Santa Jnaneshwar and his siblings. Atya truly taught me the power of a story to inspire, to evoke empathy, and to capture the imagination. I try to repay that debt by channeling Atya while reading and telling stories to my 3-year-old grandson, Tanush. Millions of children have grandmothers like mine to tell them stories. Ours has been an oral society, a nation of storytellers passing the epics down from generation to generation. But we cannot say the same thing for books and for reading. If, like me, you were surrounded by books, you were indeed fortunate, very lucky, because the sad truth is that even now, even after the strides we have made in the last few decades, a good book is a rare thing for children to access. So just look at these numbers. In the UK, there are 4 books available for every child. In India, there is 1 book for every 5 children in urban India and 1 book for every 10 children in rural India. And worse, in a country where we have 22 constitutional languages and hundreds of other languages that people speak in, most of our books are in only 2 languages. English leads by a huge margin, followed by Hindi. So, think of it. We have let down the 150 million children who can read and write and think in our other regional languages. Now, this was exactly the problem that some of us decided to tackle way back in 2004. Through the Pratham network, we had helped thousands and thousands of children to read more fluently. But then we found that they had very little to practice their newfound reading skills on. And the only book that truly reaches every household in India is the textbook, and it's kind of hard to curl up with one of those. So, even when we started libraries, we could find only a few books, even though we bought up all of them, in only a few languages other than English. And we decided something had to be done. That's when I co-founded Pratham Books with the mission of a book in every child's hand. We wanted to truly democratize the joy of reading. We wanted children from each corner of the country to get good books in their own languages that were accessible, that were affordable, that were attractive, and that were inspiring. And if that meant we had to become publishers ourselves, so be it. We learned the nuts and bolts of publishing from scratch. And soon we had dozens of books for young children, each simultaneously printed in 12 languages, and that was the breakthrough we made. And because we were a not-for-profit organization, we could subsidize the books. Because we were unafraid, we could try things no one had before and also be happy when we failed and started to try again. We had to think big, we had to disrupt, we had to be creative, we had to be bold, and we had to be fast. Within a few years, Pratham Books became the largest publisher of children's books in India. We published hundreds of books across many languages. We reached out to every writer, illustrator, editor, translator we could find. We used every channel of distribution we could think of, even sending our books out with distributors of solar energy. We partnered with Samaj, with Bazaar, and with Sarkar. With other publishers, we co-published. With government, we created statewide programs. And we worked closely with other NGOs as well. We wanted to read just as many children as we possibly could. And we succeeded beyond our expectations. Millions of children got to own their very first book thanks to Pratham Books. Millions of children got to read stories in their own languages about situations like their own, about children like themselves. These were Indian stories, indigenous tales, freshly written. They were true to the many cultures of this country. To be honest, we were much more focused on diversity than on quality in those early days, though much has changed since then. We wanted stories from every geography, every community. We wanted to showcase Indian motifs, art, and culture. We wanted books that could help children understand and enjoy the vast diversity of this country. Its geography, its climate, its people, its cultures, its flora, and its fauna. We wanted books that could help children engage with ethical issues as well. Children may begin with binaries of black and white, but good books help them to move into the grays, where all the rich nuances of life are. Books can help kids move beyond blind certainty towards a blurry doubt, and then onto a dazzling yet humbling knowledge of how much more there is in the world to learn. We wanted to offer kids all of that. And in fact, to fill in the gaps, some of us began to write books ourselves. And my innings as a published writer began. Over the years, I wrote several books for Pratham Books. I tried my best to come up with unusual stories and interesting characters. Shringeri Srinivas, the farmer, was born. Annual Haircut Day was the first in a series of 6. And I learned that it is not at all easy to write good books for young children. Many famous authors I approached told me they would love to help us in our mission, but they were very nervous to write for children and I should please excuse them. And then I began to understand why. It would take days and months to make just those 500 words as perfect as they could be. And sometimes one succeeds and often one doesn't. But the process, as most of the viewers today would agree, is most absorbing and enjoyable as well. And to know that we were creating something for so many first generation readers was soul satisfying, to say the least. And nothing, to be honest, has ever given me more joy in any of the work that I do than the sight of a child happily reading one of our books. I believe we need to create story writing courses so that we can have a whole new generation of young authors who could write for children and especially for young children. Because there is still a very long way to go before we can declare that there are enough books for India's 300 million children. At Pratham Books, we soon realized that if we really wanted to get closer to achieving our mission, we would have to think differently. There was no way we could create enough physical books to reach every child, nor would it be environmentally sustainable even if one could. And that's what we had to just crack open the model. We went digital. We put up our books in the Creative Commons, which means that our books could then be freely read online, they could be downloaded, they could be printed, they could be shared, they could even be sold. They could be retold. People could do whatever they wanted with our stories. All they had to do was acknowledge that the original story came from Pratham Books. And our goal was not to monopolize the market. In fact, our goal was to widen the market and to create much more access. So we went from being just a publisher to being a platform. We still produced physical books, but to reach the unreached child, we had to go digital too. And it worked. We helped build a vibrant new community of writers, illustrators, translators, and editors. We unlocked the door for books to parents and children. We were inching closer to our dream. When I retired from Pratham Books after 10 really adventurous years, the team, under the new leadership, took the organizations to greater heights. They pushed forward on the digital journey. And under the new name Storyweaver, they made the space for hundreds more books by hundreds of new writers in hundreds of languages to reach millions of more children, not just in India, but around the globe. The numbers speak for themselves. Hats off to the Storyweaver team for what has been achieved. And my books too were lifted by the tide. People read them and translated them and even retold them in their own ways. It really is a whole brave new world. I continue to write, and in fact, I hope you will permit me a little promo. My latest book, this time from Jagannath Books, will be out next month. My grandson was the inspiration, but I so hope that little children all over the world will enjoy this book, The Hungry Little Sky Monster, as much as I enjoyed writing it. With my grandson, by the way, my biggest competitor now is not the writers of other books, but the online version of Masha and the Bear. He has fixed quotas of screen time and eagerly waits for the next episode. His absorption is so complete, his attention riveted to his iPad, that he can't even see me then. So I think it is really tough to parent children in this new digital age, because so many questions arise. How much screen time should a child have? Is it okay to read books online? How does one keep a child interested in physical books? Now, there is a lot of research that tells us that children are not well served by too much screen time. And Neev's recent guest, Dr. Marianne Wolf, talked about the deep reading brain and the perils of digital reading. She believes that digital mediums tend to push us towards skim reading or browsing, and that skimming is bad for the brain. But look at this study by the National Literacy Trust of the UK on children and e-reading. They find data to support Wolf's theory that skim reading is bad. But this study also gives a sense of how one can move forward by showing that it is digital alone that is bad, that mixed medium reading ends up being good. The takeaway here is that to cultivate a reader, you need some physical books, but to sustain the reading habit, a mix works just as well. Which brings me to a very important point. We know that the digital age is here to stay. Today's generation are digital natives compared to their parents who are digital immigrants. Now, so I believe it is useless to fight against the myriad screens in their lives. But instead, how can the whole community of experts come together with the communities of creative artists to design a whole new digital pedagogy? How can we de-risk from fractured attention? How can we protect children from digital addiction? To do this, we will have to challenge the algorithms based on artificial intelligence that keep children glued to the next and next thing on the screen. How can we bring in a whole new code of ethics? How can we help parents to better understand where the good stuff is online? And at the same time, how can we help them not to fear technology and its ill effects? Because after all, these are not new problems, they are old problems. Parents and educators had the same issues with TV too. Groucho Marx famously said, "I find television very educating. Every time somebody turns on the set, I go into the other room and read a book." It illustrates the same issues we face today. How can we all engage in making technology work better for us all? This is the real challenge before us as a society. It is a call to action which will require creative collaboration and perseverance. And I do hope there will be much more of a discourse around it, and what better place to start than literature festivals for children. Meanwhile, we must continue our efforts to surround children with good physical books. The earlier the better, in fact. Because now so much more is known about how children learn, how quickly they begin to learn, how early they start to map their world. So I believe we almost need a new societal mission, a book in every baby's hand. And I hope all of you will join me in making sure that babies get good books too. And not just a book. As Thomas Aquinas said so long ago and so profoundly, beware of the person of one book. So, let children read many, many, many books, all kinds of books. The more diverse, the better. I am so grateful that my grandson now has so many Indian books from so many publishers that help him understand other lives, other situations different from his own. If we have to counter the polarization that is threatening democracies all over the world, we need to start with good books for young children to read. After all, as Ray Bradbury said, you don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them. We simply cannot afford people stopping the reading of books in our country. We need a generation of children who love books, who are open-minded, who are curious, who are empathetic, and who are capable of critical analysis. All these qualities can be nurtured by reading through a library of good books. And truly, to give the gift of a reading life is the best gift of all to hand over to future citizens. The Indian publishing industry has come a very long way in a short time to rise to the challenge of producing good literature rooted in the country's diverse cultures. Literature festivals and book awards are a pathway to spread the joy of reading those books to every child in the country. So really, thank you, Neev, and thank you to every single caring adult who brings a child to the magical moment at which, as Marcel Proust so wisely says, the end of the author's wisdom appears to us as but the beginning of ours. I thank Neev again and also my team, Gautam John, Natasha Joshi, and Aparna Nataraju, for helping put this presentation together. Keep reading. Thank you. Namaste.